Joining me now, the director, Simon Curtis, two of the stars, Ken Brown and Michelle Williams. I am pleased to have them. So you're watching that trailer and you're saying what?
I don't know if I've seen it before, like that, all the kind of...
But there was a certain emotion. I mean, you were sort of reacting to it as well.
Yeah, it's very... she does such... I won't spare her blushes, no, she does such a wonderful job. It's so touching. It's so touching what this man has sort of brought out of the story. It weirdly... I find myself thinking, oh, I know her. I know Marilyn. Yes. Somehow the world kind of thinks it does. And I don't know, immediately you want to go on the journey with her. And then just when you are seeing this sort of beautiful woman who somehow is opening her heart to you, also reminded she's so sexy.
Exactly. So tell us the stories. I mentioned there were two books.
Yes.
And one that you decided to do came about because he went back and wrote about that week, which he'd left out of the first
Yes,
memoir.
the truth is I sort of fell in love with both books, which the first one, The Prince, the Showgirl and Me, was the sort of overall account of his first job, Colin's first job, when he was the third assistant director on The Prince and the Showgirl. And then about 5 years later...
title only.
The second book he published 5 years later, and I just fell in love with them both, really as a sort of an account of a young man with a passion to work in films who got the golden ticket to work on this fantastic film.
With these extraordinary people. I mean,
yes.
but you took a week because clearly this is not a biopic.
Well,
this is a look at a human being.
Yes, it's not a biopic. It's a moment in time where we get a very close portrait of Marilyn Monroe at her peak. But the second book was called My Week with Marilyn, and it was our notion to combine the two books together and tell the story of Colin's journey on this film.
Seeing the script and the whole idea that they want you to play Marilyn Monroe. Did you say yes, yes, or you say no, no?
I said yes, yes. I don't know. I always find that first time that you read the script is the most... you get the most information. And so I like, for the first time that I read it, to be uninterrupted, to not be in the middle of other things. It's usually something that happens at night after I put my daughter to bed and before I fall asleep myself. And so I sat down with got in bed with the script, and when I closed it, knew that my answer was yes. My decision-making process has always been, it's just between me and the piece of material. And it's the sort of this awful feeling when you realize that you are going to say yes and that you are going to do something, because it means that it's sort of bigger than you. It means that it sort of mystifies you. It means that it challenges you in some kind of new and terrifying way, which is why you have to go do it. And so I knew that the answer was yes, and then I sort of spent a little bit of time trying to figure out if I could back out of it or change my plan or something.
But there's so much about her in terms of all the multiple parts of her. Shy and vulnerable, the biggest movie star.
Yeah, that was the thing that I think drove me mad and kept me up at night while we were shooting, is am I getting all of it? You know, so many dynamics at play, and I think it's what makes interesting characters and interesting people are opposites. And she had so many of them. She just had multitudes, and I would just sort of pull my hair out. How many of them am I capturing? How many of them? Because also your research is endless when you play a part like this. The material that's available on her was constantly taking in new information, reading new books, watching new movies, stumbling across some new documentaries, so constantly taking in new information, meaning I had to fold that into my interpretation. And so it was just, that was the question, how much of her am I able to contain at one time? So
here you are playing somebody that you've even been compared to at times, because you're on the stage, because you're a director, because you're an actor, because you've done so much Shakespeare. So you're playing Larry, to say.
Well, I mean, initially it seemed as though maybe that wasn't the smartest thing in the world to do, and that perhaps a bit like Monroe, you know that there is lots and lots to find out about and lots to absorb, and you have lots of material, but there's also lots of ways to get it wrong. And the notion of whether this sort of blurred notion of do you do an impression or an impersonation, what is the way in which you capture the essence of something that's already being seen through this sort of fairy tale lens of a young man seeing it in a way rather innocently. So he paints them perhaps not in an absolutely naturalistic way, but all of that, of course, actually just becomes something that is very exciting to do. And although Simon was saying, modestly, we helped attract actors, we were doing it because we wanted to work with him. And one of the things that was great about joining up as soon as we had our first meeting was to know that not only the business of Marilyn and Olivier and this sort of weird clash of the titans that's happening alongside this bigger part of the possibility of falling in love, perhaps, or whatever it is that's going on with Colin, was the context. It's 1956. The world is changing. England's just about to undergo a sort of theatre revolution, which will weirdly, it's hard to imagine, but have a social impact. Right. Suez Canal crisis for us, the Cold War, rock and roll's coming over. Elvis is just trumpeting sex across the Atlantic. So's Marlon Brando, so's Montgomery Clift, so's James Dean, and so's Marilyn Monroe. And somewhere, it seems, a little beat behind the band, a bunch of actors at Pinewood are trying to sort of meet it somewhere in the middle, being very thrilled by it. I think no one was more thrilled than Olivier to be arriving at a Heathrow airport that was at a standstill because Marilyn had arrived. And one of the tensions at the middle of the film, in the centre of the film, is that is both exciting and also they don't want to talk to me. So they get down to something quite sort of basic to do with the clash of a certain.
He comes away with some understanding of what superstardom means, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he had a hint of it himself. It's just that he was going through a sort of in his own writings he seems to be candid about it. He was going through a kind of a midlife crisis, and he looked to Marilyn to rescue him, and in a strange way she might well have done, but not on this movie. And the resultant tension was what, in the end, became just so irresistible to play, in addition to what Michelle was saying about just the treasure trove of material that, as an actor, makes you nervous, but it really, really makes you excited, too.
You had Olivier reading the Bible.
Well,
what was that? What did that give you?
Well, it gave me my entire makeup preparation every morning. So I'd be in the makeup chair here, and I'd see Michelle. We would meet outside. Then she'd get sort of. We'd both go into the zone, as it were, and just you'd see. I would close my eyes, put the headphones on. They'd start putting this chin piece on, the eyebrows and everything, and then he would begin this what is billed as a dramatic reading of the Bible. And boy, is it a dramatic reading of the Bible! If you want to hear exotic vocal characterization, listen to the Song of Deborah performed by Laurence Olivier. My jaw would be hanging open at the sounds this man could make. So I did that while, in another part of the forest. Michelle's, I don't know what you were listening to, but I guess...
Yeah, it's like two little command centrals. Two pilots out there. Yeah. The hell?
We're going into immersion. It's immersion time. See you at the other side. See you when you're Marilyn.
And then there's the character of Colin. Tell me who he is.
Well, as I say, he was a young man, aged 23.
Colin went to Eton and Oxford.
Yes, and he was the son of Ken Clark, who was famous for Civilization. Right. So he was a very well-connected young man. But still with a genuine passion to work in films. And, we have Eddie Redmayne playing him, and it was a very touching day because Eddie, like Colin, had gone to Eton School. Right. And there's a scene in the film where Colin takes Marilyn back to his old school, and we had Eddie taking Michelle and our crew back to the school. And it was a lovely sort of... There are quite a few scenes we did.
And that's a true scene in terms of when he takes her back and the kids there who had Eton just... react with the great...
I mean, this is Colin's version of what happened in 1956, and we've tried to stick as closely as possible to Colin's story.
And so, what was it about his character that was important to communicate?
Well, I think why Eddie...
Falling in love.
Yeah, but I think that he's both a sort of a naive young man, an innocent young man, but also strangely emotionally aware and emotionally mature, and I think
Eddie understood her more than most.
Yes, and I think the sense we have tried to present in the film is he's watching all the time. He's watching Marilyn and learning about her, and then later in the film, when he has intimate, private moments with her, he's able to bring his version of wisdom and his attempt to help and support her.
What was his insight? Now I'm talking about the real person and played by, in this case, so well. What was his insight into her?
I think he recognised her genuine ambition to be taken seriously as an actress.
And her vulnerability.
Yes, and her need to be supported. It's important to say that 1956, which Ken has described so well, but it was an incredibly important moment for Marilyn when she arrived in London, because she had these ambitions to be taken very seriously and to change her destiny, in a sense. And she'd come to London, having moved from LA to New York, now married to Arthur Miller,
comes with her.
Yes, with Milton Green, she'd set up her own production company. She was way ahead of her time to set up a production company in the hope of controlling and improving the kind of part she was offered. And she was coming to London to work with the great Olivier. And all these things she thought were going to help change her career and change the perception of her. And really, underneath the love story that is our film is the sad tale of how all these aspirations went wrong, and she was disappointed.
But she left this film to make, as you point out, one
Yes.
of the greatest films she ever made.
Yes. Well, that's the irony, but it wasn't something that she produced. I mean, it wasn't a Marilyn Monroe production, as this was. But yes, I mean, ironically, both Marilyn and Olivier went on to arguably their greatest successes. I mean, certainly Some Like It Hot is one of the greatest films ever made, and Marilyn is quite brilliant in it. And Olivier, I think rather influenced by Arthur Miller, had taken Look Back in Anger and John Osborne seriously, and you know, Olivier's next part was Archie Rice in The Entertainer, which really did rejuvenate his career in the way I think he had hoped The Prince and the Showgirl would have done.
True.
I think it's true, you know, and one of the things that was striking to me in reviewing all the films of that time is that in The Entertainer, a film only a year later, his acting technique seems transformed. So that in Prince and the Showgirl, where I think it would be fair to say that you know, Marilyn is pretty wonderful, I think, and Olivier feels slightly trapped in a sort of theatrical delivery. I think he was honest about, far be it from me to criticise him, but he's honest about the fact that it's by his very high standards, it's not perhaps his most successful performance. A year later, a year after meeting Marilyn, who just brings truth to the part, whatever it took, she's truthful. In Archie Rice and The Entertainer, it's one of the most naturalistic, open, raw, simple, beautiful pieces of acting I've ever seen from a man who a year ago seemed fossilised by his own kind of standards, you know. And suddenly he turns into a guy who's edgy and direct, and I mean, it's thrilling, and you can almost feel in his performance some sort of sense of release, as if he has burst the bubble and he's gone through into, stopped being Sir Laurence Olivier, the revered and the respected guy, and now he's right at the forefront of an edgy, sort of almost social movement.
And he appreciated the change, in a sense.
It was transformative to him in the way he was perceived, and he said of the role, both on stage and in the film, that it was his favourite part, basically, which in a career like that is quite something. Well, that came immediately after what appeared to be this kind of hitting a kind of brick wall, where he failed to understand why it was that he couldn't communicate with someone who he clearly admired so much, but somehow couldn't. I mean, he wanted her magic, and
she wanted his what?
Oh gosh, so many
Love,
things.
respect.
Approval, I think. Approval. And also, I would imagine, input, direction, but not in the way that it was being offered. You know, it was like she wanted something that was like this, not like this. It doesn't seem, you know, and there were other things getting in the way, but gosh, if only they could have.
You think
if only they could have.
Yeah, I just think, oh, maybe a year later, maybe post Entertainer.
They might have come back together after The Entertainer and after.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fraught with difficulties because, of course, Olivier had done the play on which the film was based on stage with his wife, Vivien Leigh. And he also had an attitude to the whole method school of acting based on his experience with Vivien being directed by Kazan previously.
What was his attitude?
Well, I think he was very suspicious of it, and in some ways, you know, his style of acting was the sort of basis derived from the theatre, the English way of acting in those days, and you know, the false nose and he'd approach a character from the outside, simply put.
And where do you come down on that?
I think, you know, whatever gets you there is the you know, it's an evolving thing. I always get a bit nervous when people talk about the way they like to work, because I think it changes, you know, and I think actually Olivier understood that. I think that he was hampered by directing as well as acting. I think he was hampered by the fact that he'd played the part on stage for a year. So in a way he kind of knew what was effective theatrically, and that might have been a security blanket for him as a director, but he seemed unable to do what he was clearly capable of, which was be in the moment, as a great performer himself with a great performer, and instead the nature of the character in the in the film The Prince and the Showgirl, an arrogant, paternalistic, kind of almost despotic monarch, somehow, maybe in a weird method way, infused the way he behaved, and suddenly he had to be your very stern daddy.
We wondered about that, Simon and I wondered about that, because inside of The Prince and the Showgirl, it was something I brought up to Simon, Marilyn's character, Elsie Marina, has a relationship with the young prince. Yeah. And in my sort of wondering what it was about Colin Clark, why she was able to open up to this young man, and why she trusted him, and what was so special about him, and how did he really have her attention and affection. And then when I watched the movie, I said, well, she's method acting. Her character has a relationship with this young man, and in my imagination, some part of her thought, ooh, I should explore this one. I don't know what it's like to...
So if I do it, I'll act better at it.
Is that what you mean?
Unconsciously, yes.
Yeah. Everything about the movie, in a way that has, I think, Simon's done a wonderful job in presenting something that on the surface is entertaining and enjoyable, in my view, beautifully done by my distinguished colleague and everything, but also it has more than, so it's a lovely, lovely film of great delicacy and sort of fragility and beauty, but it had many, many layers of meaning, I think, because of this weirdness, so that, in a way, The Prince and the Showgirl, where in the crudest possible terms, it's about an older man who'd like to sleep with a younger woman, is in some weird way mirrored by Olivier, who gets the greatest, most beautiful movie star in the world, who I think it's probably no secret to suppose that he would very much like to have literally or metaphorically seduced her, and that doesn't happen. So there's a kind of sense of coitus interruptus all the way through the movie. So in a way, it's an advert for the strange way in which life imitates art, I think.
As an actress, as an entertainer, what was her magic?
I don't think that she knew what it was. Oddly enough, she said that she didn't really like singing and dancing. She said that she wasn't trained. She didn't feel like she was very good at it. And to me, it's when she's at her most incandescent. But it wasn't what she yearned to do. She really did, more than anything, she wanted to be great. She wanted to be a serious actress. And she did everything that she could, studied, trained, harder than I have, harder than anybody that I know these days. But for some reason it wasn't her gift, which is always so funny to me, because especially being a method actor, her life, the material that she was given to use to make something transformative out of, is very rich stuff. But for some reason, she couldn't parlay it. She couldn't use it in the way that one is meant to be able to when you're a method actor, which is such a curious conundrum to me. It's just such a shame that didn't work out for her. So as a performer, she didn't know what her gifts were or where they were, and I think that she felt always insecure, never really a great sense of accomplishment, or from what I've read. What about you, Simon?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that she really hoped that doing this film with Olivier would bring her the credibility she so deserved. And I think the irony is that she was so desperate to get away from playing sort of ditzy showgirls, but the part in this film, that was sort of what it was. And I think when Marilyn brought her sort of scrutiny to the script didn't really hold up. And I think, I'm a great fan of Terence Rattigan, who wrote the screenplay and the play it's based on, but I don't think this was his strongest play. And I think that there was a frustration there, because it was very hard to work out the motivation.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that she had such a difficult time, is assuming, well, I'm going to take a part that Vivien Leigh played. Yes. That must be great. Yes. Olivier will be there. I know he's great.
Correct.
And I think that she didn't and then when she got there, discovered that the script was sort of full of holes.
Yes. Yeah.
And that she had saddled herself with an impossible task, basically put herself right back in the position that she has always been as a ditzy showgirl, and was really fighting against a difficult piece of material.
Where do you think that it's fascinating what you're saying about this, the inability to access these things in her life that are so rich? Where did she get this joy from? That, for instance, she like in the movie, it seems so genuine. How was she able to access this thing you described as incandescent, just where she seems so happy?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's a few things. I think that when she's singing and dancing, I think that it's it turns your mind off. Your sort of logical, critical brain is put to sleep because you're too busy doing other things. And I also think that some part of her, I think that the trauma that she experienced when she was a young girl, I think that some part of you stays locked at that age. I think that she was an eternal child. I think that some part of her profoundly didn't grow up, and I think that's where that joy, as well as the sadness, but I think that that's where it comes from, because it feels so it feels just so childlike.
And I think that plays out in our film, where Colin and Marilyn have this idyllic day out, and they at one point they go skinny dipping in the Thames, and I hope the scene works on two levels, that it should be an erotic kind of charged moment, but there should also be the element that they're two young kids having an innocent day out too, and that Colin was able to provide both those things to Marilyn in a sense.
Here is the entertainer, roll tape. And then there's the question. How do you get that wiggle?
I think I remember on my 30th birthday, I think I came up to Simon and I said, I think I got it, and then the next day it was gone.
They talk about how you discovered that Marilyn herself had sort of adopted body language. And
she was such an eternal student. You know, the things that I found that she was reading. The Thinking Body, this book so dense I could hardly get through it. That is, it's about correct placement and posture. I just started watching her movies over and over and over again, and trying to basically. She does it so well. It seems like it's natural. It seems like, oh, maybe that's how she really walks and how she really speaks, because it's so seamless. But then things start to sort of become clear, and you realize she was really quite, from all my research, she was really quite average. I hate to say it, but with a normal voice and an ordinary walk, and it was a part that she played. Marilyn Monroe was a part that she honed and developed, and so things became clear about the wiggle, that maybe there was something that always seems to kind of bind her knees a little bit, and there's a kind of figure eight to her wiggle. I used to call it. It looks like she's sort of moving in a vat of honey somehow. There's something there's a rhythm to it. There's an up tempo and a down tempo. There's an undulation to it. There's a sense of, she's sort of. So what did somebody say to me? Hate to see you leave, but love to watch you go. It's working. It works on the advance and the what's the word?
Retreat.
Then the retreat.
Yeah.
So. Gosh, I guess you just start to try and sort of break these things down, which in a way is a shame, because you're kind of demystifying the magic.
Yeah. And what did Olivier say about her in his memoir?
Numerous things. I think that he just, I guess he failed to understand her inability to show up on time. She gave an interview that where she, and maybe you'll know this much better than I, but what I took away from it was, for me, a perfectly reasonable point of view, which was that if you take yourself seriously, which at least she aspired to perhaps, she quoted in relation to punctuality the idea that, you know, if you were Picasso, if Olivier is directing Picasso, as it were, but says, tomorrow at 8 o'clock I need you to start painting Guernica, then if Picasso's not quite right for Guernica at 8 o'clock in the morning, and he's, you know, needs to wait till 4 or midnight or the middle of the next day, then you should probably let Picasso wait, you know, because it's going to be worth the wait. And Marilyn seemed to indicate that when it came to the role of the artist and what you might call the I don't know, I'm putting words in her mouth now, the relative banality of just showing up on time. This was so different. She felt that, you know, you should wait for her. She was waiting for the muse to strike. Olivier, by contrast, who, as Simon rightly says, absolutely declared that he worked from the outside in, also said, perhaps immodestly, but in his view, factually, you can only ever, if you are gifted, you can only ever be great once or twice, perhaps, in a while, and the rest of the time you have to be content with merely being very, very good. And it seemed to me that Olivier was content to do that. So he'd keep showing up at 8 o'clock, and perspiration might get him to being great 3 days in. And he didn't mind. He could cope with the 3 days where he was merely very, very good. And I had the sense that Marilyn had put herself in a position where perhaps she could only be great, and, you know, was analysing, you know, well, I don't feel right today, or the scene's funny, or it's not, you know, and that kind of different approach to what it took, waiting for the muse, or mechanically just getting on with it, fake it till you make it.
Perfect became the enemy of good.
Yeah. It's a very good way of putting it.
And it takes a tremendous amount of energy to be somebody who's slightly different than yourself.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I found in trying to understand how is it possible to not show up for 3 days at a time, or to come in. How do you have sympathy for somebody who comes in 6 hours late? And I discovered what she was to transmit that kind of energy, openness, availability, to be what everybody wants you to be. Isn't human. It's a kind of superpower, and it takes a lot of energy to source that and to put it out into the world. And some days, she says herself, what's it like to be an icon? She says it on the days when you feel lonely, tired, and unlovable. It's very difficult. It's a reason to not get out of bed, because it's so hard to exist for other people.
What if there had been the right script, the right film? What might have happened?
For her.
Yeah, for both of them.
For them.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the perfect sort of fusion would have been for the marriage with Miller to be going swimmingly well, and the recognition of mutual insecurities and admirations between her and Olivier, and Miller writes them the most fantastic, play or screenplay. She's wonderfully, riotously happy in her married life. They have a wonderful, riotously happy creative relationship, and both of them are completely renewed. She gets an Oscar. She's the, considered now a bona fide Good Housekeeping seal of approval. You're a great actress. And Larry, you're the coolest movie star on the planet. and Arise, Sir Arthur.
And Miller wins a Pulitzer Prize.
Pulitzer Prize. Yeah, that would be maybe. Who knows whether that would have done it for them, but it might.
And someone else writes the story, and a Colin, somebody writes the story of the movie that went on to change lives. Thank you. It's so great to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to meet you, and congratulations.
Thank you so much.